Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had an energizing coffee break. So my name is Harman. I'm a senior analyst with HR&A Advisors, and today I'll be talking about how we are translating the digital equity data and using Carto's analytical toolbox to enable that. All right, so a little bit about HR&A. So we are an urban planning and consultancy firm. We have presence all across the country and also internationally. We basically work to make some equitable places and programs and policies that enable for lucrative outcomes for our clients, for the communities, both in terms of socioeconomic outcomes as well as financial outcomes in an equitable fashion. We have a wide portfolio of practice areas. We work from real estate to housing to climate to broadband and digital equity. And what I'll be presenting today is one of the major work that we did in the broadband and digital equity practice that we have over the last year. So our work in broadband and digital equity space is pretty remarkable because we've been involved in this practice way before the pandemic hit us, and we started to realize how crucial the digital equity needs are. We worked on New York City's Internet Master Plan back in 2019. And we are still working with multiple states and counties to bridge the digital divide. Last year, we worked with 8 different states to create their digital equity plans and unlock millions in federal funding from the Digital Equity Act of 2021. We have worked with some of the biggest counties and cities in the country, including some of the most disconnected counties in the country. We also create digital products around such as like resource finders to allow communities to connect with digital equity providers and data-driven tools, an example of which I'll be showing shortly, which allows leaders to make dedicated investments to bridge the digital divide in a more data-driven and focused manner. Other than that, we also do a whole other services related to digital equity and broadband, including doing a benefits case for different technology cases, impact assessments, evaluation frameworks, and so on. So mapping digital equity needs. So we all know, like, after the pandemic, we have in this new world where we understand how important digital connectivity is. And for many of us, actually, we are interacting more virtually than we do physically in our day-to-day lives, both professionally as well as personally. But yet, 30 million Americans live in areas where there just is no infrastructure to allow for broadband connectivity. And 42 million Americans cannot access internet at all, be it at their home or in public spaces such as libraries or even at their work. And 3 in 10 Americans do not have access to broadband at home. And this is what we call as digital divide, and this is what we are trying to resolve at HR&A and working with different public and nonprofit clients to make it happen. But the issue is that the data on digital connectivity and digital equity needs is not well captured. Like, we have some national statistics, but we don't know where these people live who do not have access to internet. We do not know why they do not have access to internet. Is it just merely because there's no infrastructure, or are there more reasons such as they do not have devices to access these, or maybe the affordability is a concern, or they may not have the skills to use these digital services the way they should be used. So this is what digital equity and digital divide focuses on. And in order to collect this data, we have partnered with different data collection partners, including community-based organizations, as well as public agencies, and enable this creation of this data because it just doesn't exist. Only recently, the census has expanded some of the questions around digital equity needs, but it will be some years until we start seeing that data come into practice. So we work with our clients, and we have created a whole portfolio of data collection strategies. And 2 of those tools are an online survey and a paper survey. So the online survey is a collection of more than 25 questions. They are not just focused on whether you have internet or not, but they are more detailed as to why you don't have access to access to internet, and various needs-based questions such as the ones that I mentioned, like affordability concerns and accessibility concerns. And it's deployed in 22 languages, so that language barrier is not a reason why someone cannot raise their voice and raise their concerns on why they do not have access to internet. It also has an internet speed test in the survey itself. So if someone is taking the online survey at home, they can also assess the service quality, whether the speed that they're getting is what they were promised or not. And is it enough to meet their needs? We also have a paper survey because as we are trying to solve the internet connectivity issues, many of these people do not even have an internet to take the online survey. So the paper survey is a subset of the online survey questions, most critical to getting to the reasons why people do not have access to internet or why they do not have the skills for those. And it's deployed in 2 languages, English and Spanish. And as you can see, the paper survey is not digitized in a fashion that the online survey is. In both these surveys, we do collect some sort of geo-based information, such as the zip codes, but this is not georeferenced by itself. So first, we have to collect this data in very different data structures. We have to add a geography attribute to both of them, and then merge them. And then we should be able to index them and identify how many responses we have gotten from each survey, because we want a representative sample eventually. So to enable the data collection practice, we have come up with a strategic sampling technique working with our data collection partners. Unlike a random sample where we can just go out and we can start collecting data, strategic sampling is more focused on just targeting the populations and regions that we want to get the most representation from. And because these surveys are only active for a couple of months, we want to make the most of that time. So it is essential that we are collecting this data and we are sharing it with our data collection partners on a day-to-day basis so that they can see where they are getting the responses from, where they are lagging. They can compare that data with their existing information about the communities and make the most of to getting a representative sample. So we worked with the AWS and Carto team to come up with this cloud architecture. So as I said, the online survey data is already digitized, so it can be stored straight into S3. But the data that we are getting from the paper surveys first needs to be digitized, and then it can be stored at S3 as well. Once all the data is in S3, then an AWS, we created queries in Redshift, which would store all of that data in tables in Redshift. And at the same time, there are queries that will be cleaning the data because all the responses that we are getting are not essentially valid responses. And I can talk more about the data cleaning process and what valid responses means in the Q&A and how the queries function on that. So once we have cleaned the data, then we add a geography attribute, we index all the data, and finally we create a single data set that can then be mirrored into Carto. Once the data comes into Carto, we use Carto's workflows to enable some spatial joins and spatial filters to allow for a more refined delivery of the data to our data collection partners, produce certain statistics that are important for them to see, and also they can relate with those statistics in a more regular fashion. At the same time, doing more tests on the availability of data. So of course, like geography and the demographics of the respondents is important, but we also want to see if we are getting enough respondents who do not have access to internet at home. And we are also getting enough respondents who have just smartphones for accessing and not like a computer device or something like that. So that's why there's a whole layer of testing that has to be done. And as I said earlier, this has to be provided on a daily basis, like the updates on this to our data collection partners. So how AWS and Carto work together enables us to actually deliver that to our data collection partners each day. So this is a version of the dashboard that we created for our data collection partners in Colorado. The map shows the gradient on the responses that we received from each of the zip codes in Colorado. And then on the side, you can see the widgets that are capturing how many responses we are getting from different counties by different languages. There are other tests as well, which are not visible here. But as I mentioned, they are like people who can access internet at home, access internet in public spaces, and so on. So if I am a community-based organization and I'm working on collecting this data, how I can use this dashboard is I can filter based on one of the criterias that we see here in the sidebar. And let's say I want to filter this by all the Spanish respondents that we have got. So in the map, we can see where these responses are coming from, how many responses are there, their zip codes, and so on, and which counties we are getting these responses from. So as a CBO who is more focused on getting responses in Spanish and making sure that the Spanish-speaking community is well represented, I can use the map and this whole dashboard to understand where we need to deploy more resources and get more responses on a day-to-day basis. So this allows our data collection partners to do a more strategic sampling on site. So in Colorado, we deployed this survey last year from July to September, and we ended up with 5,758 valid responses with an 89% completion rate. So the actual respondents were more, but as I said, there's a data cleaning process, so the valid response numbers goes down. In the table that you see here, all the populations that are mentioned here are federally recognized target populations for bridging the digital divide. And we want our survey sample to be either well-represented or over-represented in these particular populations. And 90% of our survey respondents in Colorado belong to at least one covered population. And as you can see, a lot of them are overrepresented in our sample, except for the rural residents, which are slightly underrepresented from what the ACS data says. And so this ensures that the survey that we are analyzing eventually is capturing the voices of these covered populations. And when the state is creating their plans, they are basically addressing the needs of these populations eventually, at the end of the day. So this was my last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions if they're out there.
Were there any questions? We found microphones if that can tempt anyone with questions. No? Okay, well, are you going to be around for the rest of the day in case anyone does?
Yeah, so I'll be around, and if you want to reach out, you can scan the QR code, and that will lead you to my LinkedIn profile. And happy to connect. And if you're doing a similar data collection exercise, happy to talk more about how you can make sure that you are representing the community properly.
Thank you so much. Thank you.